Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the leading employee benefits and engagement platform.
We don't really know what will happen in the future, but we can plan for it to some extent. It's called future proofing, and it's a wise plan for organizations. Future proofing your organization will give you an advantage in a competitive market, keep you sustainable, and set you up for long-term success, especially in unpredictable times. Hi everyone, this is Sushmita from Vantage HR Influencers Podcast, and in today's episode, we'll be knowing more about what does a future-proof workplace entail and how do we go about it. For the same, I'm so excited and proud to welcome our guest speaker today, Alec Bashinsky. Alec is a strategic business thinker, an innovator, and a future of work specialist who disrupts traditional talent and HR models and aligns people focus to deliver business outcomes. Alec is currently the APAC Partner for the Josh Bersin Academy, which is the first global professional development academy for HR. He also is the managing partner of Blackhall and Pearl Talent Advisory, which focuses on HR and culture transformation, future of work, the talent experience, and diversity and inclusion through the facilitation of advanced AI tools and insights. Welcome to the show, Alec.
Hi, welcome, and how are you?
I'm fine, Alec. Thank you. So, Alec, before we start with the topic today, can you please brief us about your experience in HR?
Well, I'll try and do that in a very short way. It's a fairly long set of experiences. I've had about 35, 40 years in human resources. I originally started my career in retail and then moved to technology. I've worked for global technology companies in Asia Pacific, such as 3Com, Cisco Systems, PeopleSoft, and then I've spent about the last 15 years as the CHRO, firstly for Australia and then Asia Pacific for Deloitte. I also, in my career times, have done interesting jobs, including the CHRO for the market entry for Toys R Us in Australia. So it's quite an extensive career in HR.
So we'll brief everything about it in the content that we post after our podcast. So let's start with the topic then, Alec.
Okay.
Right. So, Alec, as businesses have begun to reopen, employers are challenged with how to set their organizations up for success. Do you feel the organizations, should reevaluate their approach to business or augment their existing protocols to still remain competitive and mostly to create a future-proof workplace?
Look, I think the very short answer to that is yes. At businesses today, post the COVID pandemic, absolutely need to totally reevaluate their business models and how in particular they are employing, engaging and developing their people. Our Josh Bersin Academy research, so we call it the Big Reset, has already identified that new protocols and systems need to be established. Things such as a new approach to employee wellbeing, a total HR transformation in itself, new approaches to leadership and culture, and in particular, as everybody's talking about, new back to work, workplace practices and a strong focus on how employees actually engage with their managers.
Mm-hmm. So, HR teams, have had to improve their organizational agility since the pandemic started in order to keep up with the rapid unforeseen changes to the workplaces, including a major move to remote work. So, as the pandemic threatens to place many companies' futures in jeopardy, prioritizing and caring for workers have become really crucial in making a future-proof workplace. But I believe HR has always been responsible for this, but now it has taken a really new sense. What is your opinion on the evolving role of HR, given the anxiety caused by the outbreak of the disease, of the pandemic?
Well, I think HR has actually had to be front and centre in this pandemic. If we weren't a valued resource to the CEO and the executive team, then that has absolutely changed because we really needed to be able to advise the CEO and the executive of what needs to happen during the pandemic and indeed how the roles will change post the pandemic. So organisations need HR's help to redefine, what their organisational structures look like. For example, less of a hierarchical structure, which makes decision-making slow, and one that is faster and easier to make decisions. New leadership models where leaders need to, adapt to a new set of skills to be able to lead and manage their people remotely. HR needs to be at the forefront of communicating with employees and also helping their leaders understand how to communicate with employees, especially, if they're working from home. And the other issue that is being discussed a lot is, HR needs to help the business reevaluate performance measures because there are so many different things happening in the way we work that the old performance measures in many cases just don't work at all. Other things like the employee experience has now become a corporate strategy, and HR must lead that change and challenge. They need to help the business understand to look at employee segments, employee journeys and how will they change, the role of service delivery centres and what an organisation needs to do to adapt to that. And probably the biggest thing from a change perspective for HR is that they need to transform themselves, the way they operate, their operating models, their focus on digital. So that is a very, very big change element for HR during and post the COVID pandemic.
Right, right. So you also mentioned about leadership challenges. So I believe it's actually very crucial to have leadership training for the tenured managers and also the new ones to cope up with the new situation, right, in the workplaces.
Yes, certainly. I think, when you start to talk about leadership training, and we're talking about the executive team here as well as managers at all levels, because firstly, they need to be trained to be sensitive in diversity and inclusion. They need to be trained to understand wellbeing and the impact on employees and how employees are feeling. They need to build their supportive skills, and we also need to understand when our fellow managers are under stress. And overall, a new set of leadership skills have become two things that maybe have not been that strong in a leader's armoury, and that is for a leader to have patience and to be more forgiving in the current environment, yet still just as importantly, the need for the leader to make accountability very clear. If anything, the pandemic has accelerated the leadership shift to one of being more supportive, one of being a coach, and one of being a more facilitative style of leader.
Okay, so now as a staff and office leaders have struggled to adapt to new normal, like from working from home or adapting to the required technologies, and most importantly, we should mention about digital communication. And all of this have now become a requirement rather than an option. Do you think the overabundance of digital communication resulting in social and physical isolation is sparking more need for actual human connection? I mean, to create a future-proof workplace, don't you think we should seriously focus on the human of HR from now onwards?
Look, I hear that a lot, and I think, in part I agree with it, but the new world of work is one of digital transformation. I think employee engagement's become more important. And in the past, when we looked at employee surveys and other sorts of digital transformations, it basically meant let's simplify a system, let's integrate, or let's build a digital work experience. Now we've got products like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, WebEx, all of those sorts of things. That sort of communication platform is sweeping the world. Everybody's probably sick of doing Zoom and those sorts of things. Right. But that won't go away. Again, our research at the Josh Bersin Academy is showing that more global organisations are going out there and looking at the type of digital communication tools that are available. And yes, there are hundreds of them out there, but we have to accept that it's a way we're going to work. And we have to find the best tools that suit our organisation. And we may also want to consider hiring people who understand data and systems and communications, and particularly communications, because it's never been a strong part of the HR framework. So, yes, we'd all love to come back to the office, but I think, again, our research is showing us very clearly and very strongly that most global companies, their employees are telling them one of three things. The first thing they're saying is, do you want to come back to the office full time? Do you want to come back to the office a few days and work from home for the other few days? Or thirdly, do you just want to work from home? And many employees have found, working from home has been a real blessing. So it's going to be really difficult to get many employees back to the
workplace.
Yeah. So, if you can get them back for specific events, for specific launches, for specific communications, you can have that human-to-human element, but we have to get used to the fact that the way we will work moving forward will be with digital communication with our employees.
Okay, really nicely explained, Alec. So, so during the pandemic, we were all threatened by the increasing risk of the virus, and almost all of us have, lost a relative or a friend, which has a persisting impact on mind, causing a post-traumatic fear. Isn't it the right time to realize the importance of mental health and take preventive measures for the employees?
Absolutely. I think, we've just, Josh Bersin has just done some research around 2021 HR predictions. And one of the key elements of that is that wellbeing will all of a sudden become a board level awareness or accountability. Wellbeing's not just critical for employee safety, but the organisation and especially HR has to ensure a safe working environment. So the impact of what they do, how they do it, coupled with mental health. I mean, I've heard some stories where a lot of employees are sitting by themselves in a one-bedroom apartment, and they have little communication with anybody except on Zoom or on digital. So they're feeling very isolated. They don't have a lot of people to talk to. And because of the lockdowns with pandemic, their mental health has become quite fragile. So we at Josh Bersin Academy, we talk with HR leaders all the time, and we hear the same thing over and over, and that is employee health, wellbeing and safety now has to be embedded as part of corporate culture. So before it might have been a nice benefit to have, now it's absolutely critical to ensure that it's embedded in an organisation's corporate culture, and that every HR leader and every business leader knows what to do in certain circumstances to preserve employee wellbeing.
Right. Yeah. So when we talk about the future of the workplace, it is no longer molded around what has worked, but instead what will work moving forward. So would you like to share some insights on this with our HRs and aspiring managers?
Yeah, certainly. It's one of the most asked questions that I get and that we get, and I do a lot of presentations and we do a lot of work around helping organisations develop a strategy for the future of work. So, look, a couple of points that, for HR leaders and aspiring managers is that, firstly, as strange as this may sound, there's a new war for talent out there. Research again shows that there a high level of jobs already out in the marketplace. In fact, as many as there were 12 months ago. But the focus seems to be shifting to more service-related roles. So you may replace an operational internal role with a service-focused role. So the war for talent as organisations come out of pandemic is absolutely going to be back on the agenda, and HR needs to be ready for that. The second element I would say is that, again, it's probably the other area that I spend most of my time, is that HR transformation will occur, and it will become very strongly linked to digitising HR. So HR leaders of tomorrow need to be aware of what tools and, if you like, applications exist. They need to understand analytics and how to not just analyse the workforce from an age, tenure point of view, but also from a point of view of the type of skills that are available, where do they find them, what are the insights that I see in business decisions. So Analytics and data and digital are three key areas. And the fourth one that I would say to HR leaders that they need to start to read about and understand is part of this technology and digital transformation is HR tools are starting to adapt to artificial intelligence. So the AI concept and being able to use artificial intelligence to look at the way employees behave, to understand where key influences are, is going to become a key element. I mentioned employee experience before. It's absolutely critical. I hear more and more stories of new employees starting with a company and being onboarded from their own homes. So the onboarding is actually changing. It's no longer in the office. And the way you do that is critical to the employee experience, the way you communicate, the way you manage, the way you provide feedback. So the employee experience is probably the next key element.
Right.
The other two things I'd say to you is that there will be an even heavier focus on skills and capabilities. A lot of HR practitioners have got caught up in this competency model and having all of these different requirements. The ability to understand and how to do a skill within HR, and again, I talked about data analytics and digitization as two capabilities. There's going to be a far greater emphasis around what employee skills do they have, what capabilities can they bring to a job. And in fact, at Bersin, we've developed a capability assessment diagnostic, which it's been in huge demand because it's helping HR departments firstly do a diagnostic on their function, understand where the gaps and the strengths are, and then understand where they need to either develop or recruit. So heavy focus on skills and capabilities. The other area that is changing dramatically is that learning and development will continue to be disrupted. We're seeing huge change around the way learning systems are being pushed out. We're seeing more and more programs being offered to employees, and the take-up is increasing upwards of 50% because employees are sitting at home and they're feeling they've got an opportunity to be developed. So the adoption rate is very strong, and you're seeing more and more providers try and get into that space. So if I'm somewhere like Culture Amp and I just look at doing employee surveys, I'm starting to look at how I can increase my capabilities as a company by building learning and development capabilities. So all different and unique providers are now starting to move into employee communications and into learning development. So they're probably 5 or 6 key things that we see as changing, particularly for the future of HR and what HR leaders and practitioners need to focus on as we move further into 2021 and into 2022.
Amazing, Alec. I really love listening to it, and I'm sure that our listeners will be really, helpful with this. So, Alec, any HR book that you'll suggest our listeners to read?
That's a really hard one. I think the best thing that you would need to do is to look at some of the webinars that are being distributed amongst some of the better practitioners. Everything from obviously Gartner to Bersin to a range of others that are actually talking about what's happening in the future of HR. So your best opportunities to try and connect with what is happening out there and then look at those webinars as a way of building your own knowledge and your own education. Unfortunately, things like HR textbooks have a very limited lifespan because by the time they're written, the information's out of date.
Okay, so Alec, how can our listeners reach out to you?
Okay, that's fairly easy. You can contact me through an email address. It's alec.bashinsky at bersinacademy.com. And if you would like to pop that onto my bio somewhere there, they can certainly make contact with me that way. I'm doing a lot of work with clients in Asia Pacific, and it's some really interesting things are coming out of the advisory work that we're doing. So happy to have a conversation, happy to steer people in the right direction. And yeah, wherever I can help, I'll be glad to do so.
Right. Yeah, I'll surely put that up in the show notes. So, Alec, that was a really interesting and insightful conversation. Thank you so much for being a part of the Vantage HR Influencers podcast.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I hope your listeners got something out of it this afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for new episodes.